I am truly happy to welcome you to another stage of our journey together. I am the quantum architect, and I want to start this video by speaking directly to you. I have a simple but deeply important question for you today. Have you felt any change yet? Have you noticed any tangible results? Perhaps something inside you has reorganized or shifted its place. Or maybe you have even started to see things materialize in your physical life. I am not asking this just to make polite conversation. Since the very beginning of this channel, I have made one thing crystal clear. Nothing we have built here was designed as isolated content. We are not just making noise to fill the silence. Each video is a deliberate step. Each message connects seamlessly to the one before it and prepares the ground for the next step. This journey was designed to raise consciousness, gradually respecting the internal timing of each person. Because real transformation does not happen through brute force. It happens through coherence. It happens when the internal gears finally click into place without friction. Many people arrived here carrying losses, emotional losses, a loss of meaning, a loss of direction. And when a loss is not embraced or processed, it does not simply vanish into thin air. It transforms into a silent pain. It becomes a prolonged sadness or a deep fatigue that a simple nap cannot fix. This is not weakness. It is the result of an emotional system that was pushed far beyond what it could sustain alone. That is why today I want to deepen our understanding of something essential: emotions. We are not talking about emotions as mere theory or abstract poetry. We are talking about them as real forces, forces that organize the very field where your life takes place. Everything you feel emits a specific frequency. Every emotion generates a pattern in your field, and this pattern influences the body and the mind and your perception. It dictates exactly how reality responds to you. In this video, I am inviting you to a mini journey of emotional mastery. We are not here to repress them or to pretend they do not exist. That would be useless. We are here to learn how to traverse them consciously. We will learn to sustain higher and more stable feelings that are actually favorable to life. Everything built up to this point was preparation for this moment, and everything that comes next deepens this capacity. If you feel this message resonates with you, then stay with me. Take a breath. Allow this content to touch you at the right rhythm. You will be surprised by what I am going to reveal to you by the end of this video, and I have absolute certainty that this can help you in an extraordinary way. The journey continues. Before we attempt any kind of emotional mastery, there is something that needs to be understood with absolute clarity. We need to clear the air about the nature of what you feel. Emotions are not errors in the human system. They are not glitches in the software that need to be patched or corrected. And most definitely, they are not weaknesses or character flaws. Emotions are sophisticated mechanisms for reading reality. I want you to understand this slowly because this is where a profound shift in perspective begins. Everything you feel stems from an interpretation. It might be conscious, or it might be completely unconscious. It is an interpretation of what is happening around you, and crucially, what is happening inside you. The body always feels before the mind has a chance to explain. In most cases, by the time your logical mind arrives at the scene, the emotional field has already been organized. The mind is often just trying to catch up. Therefore, emotions are never random events. They do not just fall out of the sky. They are coherent responses to a complex system of beliefs and experiences. They react to memories and expectations that are active in your neurology at that specific moment. Now let us bring this down to real life with a practical example. Imagine a simple everyday situation. You send an important text message to someone and you do not receive a reply. This is the neutral event. One person immediately spirals into anxiety. They start creating catastrophic scenarios in their head. They feel rejection. They feel a tightness in their chest. They feel a restless agitation that ruins their entire afternoon. Another person notices the lack of response, but maintains total neutrality. They continue with their day. They do not build internal narratives about why the other person is silent. The external stimulus is exactly the same for both people. The silence is the same, but the emotion is completely different. What changes is not the fact itself. What changes is the internal field from which the fact is interpreted. It is exactly here that the vast majority of people get lost. They believe that life is causing their emotions. They think the external world is to blame, but in truth, emotions are organizing the way life is perceived and how you respond to it. When I speak symbolically with Carl Jung, he would say that emotions are contents of the unconscious emerging into consciousness. They come up to be integrated and not to be fought against like enemies. Carl Rogers would remind us of a paradox. He would say that what is fully accepted transforms itself, but what is rejected tends to crystallize and become permanent. Jordan Peterson would point out that the inability to regulate your own emotional state leads the individual directly into internal chaos. And we know that chaos always precedes bad decisions. And Helio Couto would reinforce something essential to our understanding. Emotion is a field, and the field generates reality. Notice how all of them point in the same direction, even though they use different languages. The great problem is not feeling fear or sadness or anger or frustration. These are human experiences. The problem is inhabiting these emotions as if they were your identity. When this happens, the field stops being fluid. It becomes rigid. It becomes a trap. And here I need to be brutally honest with you. A large portion of the people who arrived at this channel were not looking for prosperity or high consciousness or spiritual expansion. They were simply looking for relief. They wanted relief from emotional pain, relief from internal exhaustion, relief from that nagging sensation of being lost in life. This happens because the human emotional system has been pushed far beyond what it was prepared to sustain. But do not worry, because I am here to help you overcome this condition. We live in a world that demands high performance and speed. It demands success and constant adaptation. But it almost never teaches anyone how to regulate their own internal state. And without emotional regulation, there is no clarity. Without clarity, there is no conscious choice. And without conscious choice, life becomes just a chain reaction of accidents. Emotions, therefore, are not the problem. They are the control panel. What you feel right now is informing you exactly how your field is organized at this moment. This affects your body and your decisions. It affects your relationships and your perception of opportunities. It even affects your relationship with time itself. When you sustain dense emotions for long periods, the field enters survival mode. When you sustain stable and coherent emotions, the field begins to respond with fluidity. This is not magic. It is systemic coherence. This chapter exists for one reason, so that you stop fighting against what you feel and start understanding the functional role of emotions in the architecture of your life. Nothing here is about eliminating emotions. That would be impossible. Everything is about learning not to be governed by them. In the next chapter, I will lead you to the first exercise of this journey. But before any practice, you needed to understand this fundamental truth. Emotions are not against you. They are trying to show you where your field has lost alignment. And when you learn to listen without reacting, something begins to reorganize naturally. The journey continues. Before we jump into any practical exercise, you need to comprehend something fundamental. This concept supports every single piece of emotional work we will do from this point forward. Emotions do not exist merely as internal sensations or fleeting feelings. They exist as frequency, and they exist as vibration. We need to look at the physics of this. Everything vibrates. The physical body vibrates. Every thought creates a vibration, and emotions vibrate too. When we speak of emotional vibration, we are really talking about the level of organization within your internal field. We are talking about entropy versus order. Low frequencies do not mean something is bad in a moral sense. That is a common misunderstanding. Low frequencies simply indicate greater density. They indicate a state of contraction and a higher activation of survival modes. High frequencies do not indicate spiritual superiority or holiness. They simply indicate greater internal coherence. They mean there is less emotional static noise and much greater perceptual clarity. When you vibrate predominantly in lower emotional states, the field becomes susceptible to vulnerabilities. These are not just emotional vulnerabilities. They are cognitive and physical and relational vulnerabilities. Let us look at the mechanics of this. Sustained fear generates hypervigilance, where you are always scanning for threats. Continuous guilt generates self-attack, where you become your own prosecutor. Shame generates retraction and isolation from the world. Chronic anger generates rigidity and inevitable conflict. Prolonged sadness generates a loss of vital energy. These states do not just cause discomfort. They actively reduce your capacity to perceive reality clearly. They narrow your field of choices. They force you to react blindly instead of responding intelligently. Life becomes a constant defense mechanism. Now, observe the other side of the spectrum. There are emotions that organize the field not because they are intense, but because they are stabilizing. Internal security calms the entire nervous system. Acceptance reduces friction and resistance. Silent gratitude widens your perception of what is possible. Trust decreases mental wear and tear. Presence generates immediate clarity. These states make the field vibrate higher because they reduce internal noise. They protect you because they make your decisions more conscious. Your responses become more balanced, and your relationships become less draining. Here is a fundamental point that you must not miss. This is not about feeling high emotions all the time. That is impossible, and quite frankly, it is undesirable. The real objective of this work is conscious neutrality. This is the sweet spot. It is the point where you are not dominated by dense emotions, but you also do not depend on elevated states to feel okay. Neutrality is synonymous with internal stability. Low vibrations should not be avoided out of fear. They must be understood with wisdom. Every emotion that vibrates lower carries important data. But this data needs to be explored with consciousness and not lived on autopilot. When a low vibration emotion arises, it is not there to govern your actions. It is there to signal something that needs to be seen or adjusted or protected. Take anger, for example. Anger can fulfill completely different functions depending on how it is sustained. When anger arises and paralyzes you, it blinds you. It makes you react impulsively or stops you from creating something constructive. In this case, it is poorly integrated and it dominates the field. But there is another side to it. When anger arises as a clear boundary, it serves a purpose. It prevents you from accepting abuse. It stops you from violating your own values or hurting someone else. In this context, it fulfills a protective and healthy function. The same applies to fear and to sadness and to frustration. They become destructive when they assume the pilot's seat. They become allies when they are observed and traversed and integrated. Neutrality is not indifference. Neutrality is internal sovereignty. It is the capacity to feel without being dragged away. It is the ability to recognize without identifying. It is the power to respond without reacting. When you sustain neutrality, the field stabilizes. And from this stability, higher feelings emerge naturally, without effort and without fantasy. This is the point that protects you. We do not achieve this by running away from emotion, but through emotional maturity. Jung would say that making conscious what previously operated on automatic is the beginning of integration. Rogers would remind us that what is fully embraced is what finally transforms. Peterson would state that regulating your emotional state is the only barrier against internal chaos dominating your life. And Helio Couto would reinforce that the field responds to your sustained vibration and not to your momentary wish. Without vibrational awareness, there is no sustainability of the field. Now that this is clear, I can lead you to the first exercise of this journey. Do not view this as a magic technique. View it as training your perception. Throughout your day, simply choose a few moments to stop and observe. Ask yourself what emotion is present right now. Does it contract or expand you? Does it accelerate your system or stabilize it? Does it lead you toward reaction or keep you in neutrality? Do not judge what you find. Do not try to correct it yet. Just recognize it. This simple act already begins to elevate the field because consciousness reduces automatism. When you know which vibrational level you are operating on, you stop fighting against the emotion. You start to position yourself internally. This is the real beginning of emotional mastery. If this content makes sense to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. This helps this journey reach more people who never learn to comprehend and regulate their own emotional field. In the next chapter, I will deepen the understanding of why observing without interfering is one of the most powerful tools in existence. It is the key to reorganizing emotions naturally and safely. The journey continues. Now that you have grasped the relationship between emotion and frequency and neutrality, it is time to introduce a fundamental piece of this internal architecture. This is the keystone. It is the specific element that allows everything we have discussed so far to actually become possible in practice. We are talking about the conscious observer. The conscious observer is not some distant mystical concept reserved for monks in a cave. It is not a special ability granted only to a chosen few. It is a biological and psychological function of human consciousness. It is natural, but in most cases it has been completely suffocated. It is buried under the weight of excessive stimuli and social pressures and automatic reactions. When you are not actively conscious of your internal state, emotions take the wheel silently. They do not ask for permission. They simply assume control. They guide your decisions. They shape your perceptions of reality. They influence your behaviors before you even realize what is happening. This is what we call the emotional autopilot. It is a state where the passenger has fallen asleep and the vehicle is driving itself based on old maps. The conscious observer emerges the exact instant you perceive what you are feeling without merging with it. It happens when something inside you takes a small but deliberate step back. You start to watch your own internal state with total lucidity. This point is extremely subtle. You might miss it if you are not paying attention, but it is deeply powerful. It is the difference between being inside the storm and watching the storm from a window. When Jung spoke about making the unconscious content conscious, he was not suggesting constant psychoanalysis or rigid mental control. He was pointing to this exact moment. The moment where consciousness separates itself from the emotion just enough to allow integration. What is seen loses its power to govern you. Carl Rogers reinforced that real change only happens when the individual permits themselves to observe their own internal experience without judgment, not to correct it immediately, but to comprehend it. The conscious observer does not force transformation. It creates the necessary space for transformation to happen. Jordan Peterson would bring a very sharp perspective here. When an individual fails to regulate their own emotional state, internal chaos inevitably spills over into external life. The observer is the barrier. It is what prevents that chaos from turning into a spoken curse or a rash decision or a destructive attitude. And Helio Couto would reinforce the essential mechanics. Without an observer, there is no organized field. There is only reaction. The field responds to what is sustained with consciousness, not to what explodes without direction. Please observe something important. The conscious observer does not eliminate emotions. It does not stop fear or anger or sadness from arising. That is not its job. Its job is to prevent those emotions from becoming your identity or your command center. Without the observer, a person says, "I am anxious." With the observer, the person says, "There is anxiety present right now." This might seem like a semantic trick, but this small difference changes everything. When you use the words "I am," you claim that emotion as your definition. You identify with it, it dominates the field. When you observe it, the emotion begins to reorganize, not through repression, but through clarity. It is exactly here that neutrality begins to solidify. Neutrality is not the absence of emotion. Neutrality is presence with lucidity. The conscious observer allows you to feel without being dragged away by the current. It allows you to recognize without reacting. It allows you to choose before you respond. And this has a profound impact on daily life. A person without an observer reacts blindly in traffic. They react in heated arguments. They react to small daily frustrations. A person with an observer perceives the impulse to react, but chooses whether to engage or not. The stimulus is the same, but the response is completely different. This is the beginning of internal sovereignty. The more you strengthen the observer, the less energy you bleed into unnecessary internal conflicts. The field stabilizes. Perception expands. Decisions become aligned. But I must say something with total honesty here. Developing the conscious observer is not comfortable in the beginning. It exposes your patterns. It reveals your robotic automatisms. It shows you internal incoherencies that were previously hidden by your reactions. But that is exactly what makes it so valuable. Without an observer, you live repeating the same emotional stories over and over again. With an observer, you finally begin to end them. This chapter exists so you can understand that it is impossible to sustain neutrality without conscious presence. And it is impossible to sustain conscious presence while you are confused with everything you feel. In the next chapter, I will show you the single biggest mistake people make. It is not feeling difficult emotions. It is transforming those emotions into identity. And I will show you how that silently imprisons the field and prevents any real reorganization. The journey continues. Now I want to guide you to a delicate but absolutely decisive point in this journey. We need to talk about a silent error that the majority of people commit without ever realizing it. This error keeps the emotional field trapped, even when there is a genuine intention to change. The mistake is confusing emotion with identity. It is a linguistic trap that becomes a biological trap. When someone says, "I am anxious," or "I am depressive," or "I am an angry person," something very subtle happens internally. The emotion stops being a passing state and becomes a label. It becomes a definition. And when this happens, the field crystallizes. An emotion is something that can be traversed. It is a tunnel you walk through. But an identity is something that must be defended. It is a fortress you build. Let us see how this appears in daily life. Imagine a person who went through a sequence of frustrations at work. Perhaps their projects were not recognized or expectations were broken. They feel a sense of injustice. At the beginning, there is only sadness and discouragement. This is human and completely understandable. But over time, this person begins to present themselves to the world through this lens. They start saying, "I am someone who is never valued," or "I always try hard, and it never works out." Notice the shift. The initial emotion was sadness. The constructed identity becomes permanent failure or victim of injustice. From this point on, the field no longer reacts to the facts. It starts filtering reality to confirm the identity. When a new opportunity arises, it is devalued immediately. When something goes right, it is minimized as luck. When something goes wrong, it becomes proof. It turns into evidence that the identity is correct. This does not happen out of malice or weakness. It happens because the human emotional system seeks coherence. The brain loves patterns even if that coherence is painful. Jung would warn us that when emotional content is not integrated, it manifests as destiny. This means that what is not recognized consciously starts to command your life from the shadows. It looks like bad luck, but it is actually a pattern. Carl Rogers would say that the problem is not the feeling itself. The problem is the lack of accepting the internal experience as something transient. When an individual defines themselves by the emotion, they stop being open to change. They become static. Jordan Peterson would point out that assuming a rigid emotional identity is a sophisticated way to avoid responsibility. Because if I am this way, then I have no choice. There is no conscious action required. There is only repetition. And Helio Couto would reinforce the essential physics of this. When you glue identity to emotion, the field loses fluidity. And a rigid field does not create. It does not expand. And it does not respond well to life. Here is an important point that needs to be crystal clear. You are not what you feel. You are simply feeling something. This distinction seems simple, but it is liberating. When you say there is sadness present, you open space for observation. When you say I am sad, you close the field around that narrative. Neutrality begins exactly here. It starts the moment you stop presenting yourself to the world and to yourself based on the emotions you are living through. This does not mean denying feelings. It means not allowing them to define who you are. An observed emotion transforms. A defended emotion perpetuates itself. In daily life, this changes everything. In a difficult conversation, someone without this awareness reacts to protect their emotional identity. Someone with neutrality perceives the discomfort and chooses how to respond. The conflict is the same, but the consequences are completely different. When you sustain the conscious observer, as we saw in the previous chapter, the identity stops being dragged by the emotions of the moment. The field becomes lighter. It becomes more flexible. It becomes more creative. This chapter exists so that you stop fighting against what you feel, and also so you stop defining yourself by what you feel. Between these two extremes exists emotional maturity, and it is exactly this maturity that prepares us for the next step. In the next chapter, I will lead you to the second exercise of this journey, an exercise that does not seek to eliminate difficult emotions, but to teach them to fulfill their correct function without dominating the field. If this content is making sense to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. This helps this message reach people who are still trapped in emotional identities they never questioned. The journey continues. Now that you clearly understand the difference between emotion and identity, and have begun to strengthen the conscious observer, it is time to advance. We are moving to an even more delicate point in this architecture. We need to learn how to deal with dense, heavy emotions without repressing them and without being dominated by them. This is arguably one of the greatest emotional challenges of the human experience. Most people oscillate wildly between two extremes. On one side, you have repression. You pretend everything is fine while you are screaming inside. You put on a polite mask and stuff the feeling down. On the other side, you have total surrender to the emotion. You allow the feeling to hijack your thoughts and your words and your actions. You explode or you collapse. Neither of these paths generates emotional maturity. Neither of them solves the problem. Repressing emotions does not elevate your field. It simply pushes the energy into deeper layers of your psyche where it continues to act silently and often more destructively. Being dominated by the emotion does not help either. It merely exchanges consciousness for impulse. It is a loss of control masquerading as expression. The path we are building here is different. It is the path of conscious transmutation. Transmuting is not denying, it is emotional alchemy. Transmuting means allowing the emotion to fulfill its function without assuming command of the field. Jung would view transmutation as integration. When an emotional content is recognized, it stops acting as a shadow and starts becoming a resource. Rogers would remind us that what is fully welcomed naturally finds a path of reorganization. The energy shifts when it feels heard. Peterson would say that regulating emotions is exactly what prevents momentary impulses from destroying the important structures of your life. And Heliokuto would reinforce that the field only reorganizes when there is sustained consciousness. Before any exercise, it is essential to understand one core principle. Dense emotions do not arise to punish you. They arise to protect something. They are guardians. They are protecting a boundary or a value or a sense of integrity or an unmet need. When you fight against the emotion, you are fighting against the information it carries. When you surrender to the emotion blindly, you lose your sovereignty. But when you observe and integrate, you mature. It is from this understanding that I will lead you to the second exercise of this journey. This exercise is not fast. It is not a performance for social media. It is internal, and it is deep. When a dense emotion arises like anger or fear or frustration or sadness, the first attitude is not to act. The first attitude is to interrupt the automatic impulse, hit the pause button, breathe consciously for a few moments and observe the body. Locate the sensation physically. Where does this emotion manifest? Is it a tightness in the chest? Is it heat in the face? Is it tension in the shoulders? Is it an acceleration in the gut? Just observe the data. Next, ask an internal question with total honesty. What is this emotion trying to protect in me right now? Do not look for an intellectual answer or a thesis paper. Allow the answer to surface as a sensation or an image or a simple understanding. You might be surprised. Anger might be protecting a necessary boundary. Fear might be protecting your safety or need for preparation. Sadness might be protecting a deep bond or signaling the importance of something lost. Frustration might be protecting a core value that is being ignored. After recognizing this, do not try to eliminate the emotion. That is violent. Instead, consciously introduce an adjacent feeling. We are looking for something slightly more stable. Do not try to jump to the opposite. You cannot jump from deep depression to ecstatic joy. That is fake. Just go one step up. From blinding anger, move to conscious boundary setting. From paralyzing fear, move to cautious preparation. From deep sadness, move to self-acceptance. From chaotic frustration, move to clarity. This movement is subtle, but it is powerful. It keeps the information of the emotion but removes the command from it. This is transmutation. By doing this, you are not becoming cold or indifferent or robotic. You are becoming responsible for your own field. Neutrality begins to consolidate exactly at this point. In the beginning, this requires active attention. It feels like work, but with time, it becomes natural. The field learns that it does not need to collapse or explode to be heard. This exercise strengthens something very important: internal trust. When you realize that you can traverse difficult emotions without losing yourself in them, something stabilizes deeply. And it is this stability that prepares the ground for the next chapters. If this exercise makes sense to you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. This helps this message reach people who still believe that feeling is synonymous with losing control. In the next chapter, I will show you why sustaining an emotional state is much more important than feeling intense peak emotions. And I will show you how this changes completely the way reality responds to you. The journey continues. There is a very common error that people make when they begin to work on their emotional field. They fall into a trap. They believe that transformation happens in the exact moment they feel something better. They act as if spiritual elevation is linked to fleeting moments of relief or enthusiasm or temporary well-being. They chase the high. But the reality of the mechanics is quite different. What transforms your life is not the emotional peak. It is the state you are able to sustain when the peak inevitably fades away. Alan Watts explains this brilliantly in his lectures on consciousness and flow. In his reflections gathered in The Wisdom of Insecurity, he points out a crucial paradox. Human suffering arises largely from the constant attempt to cling to transient states. We try to grab the water of the river. When we seek to repeat pleasant emotions or frantically avoid uncomfortable ones, we enter into direct conflict with the nature of human experience itself. Life is movement. Emotions rise and they fall. The problem is not the movement. The problem is trying to live on emotional exceptions instead of building internal stability. Sustaining a state means maintaining coherence even when the environment changes. It means not depending on external stimuli to remain organized internally. Jung, in his extensive work, made it very clear. That which is not integrated returns compulsively. Intense emotions that do not find conscious support become repetitive cycles. The person feels amazing. Then they lose the state. Then they feel it again. Then they crash again. The field never stabilizes. It is a roller coaster that goes nowhere. That is why so many people live in a state of emotional exhaustion. They oscillate between moments of high hope and long periods of deep contraction. It is not a lack of strength or willpower. It is simply a lack of structural sustenance. When you learn to sustain neutrality, the behavior of the field changes. Neutrality does not eliminate emotions. It simply prevents them from governing the system. As Alan Watts also points out in the book on the taboo against knowing who you are, the attempt to control internal experience generates tension. It is the law of reversed effort. On the other hand, the capacity to remain present without identifying with the passing content creates fluidity. Sustaining is not control. It is conscious permanence. It is staying in the room. Jordan Peterson would approach this point very practically. He would say that an emotionally immature individual reacts to the impulse of the moment. An emotionally structured individual sustains their posture even under pressure. This is not repression. This is responsibility. It is the ability to act properly regardless of how you feel. Haleo Couto reinforces the physics of this. The field responds to the vibrational average. It does not respond to the extremes. It does not matter how many times you feel good for 5 minutes. The field organizes itself based on what remains over time. It responds to your baseline. Here lies an essential distinction that you must memorize. Feeling is inevitable. Sustaining is a choice. When you sustain states like presence and clarity and internal security even on difficult days, the field stops oscillating violently. Your decisions become cleaner, your relationships become less reactive, your perception becomes wider. This does not mean the absence of pain. It means that pain does not hijack the system. In daily practice, this manifests concretely. One person who sustains neutrality does not enter into conflict over every little stimulus. They perceive, they evaluate, and then they respond. Another person without sustenance lives their life putting out emotional fires created by their own automatism. This chapter exists to show you that true emotional mastery is not about feeling better all the time. It is about remaining whole, regardless of what is being felt. In the next chapter, I will bring clear examples from daily life. I want you to recognize exactly how sustenance or the lack of it shapes practical results in your life. We will look at relationships and simple choices. The journey continues. Up to this point, I have guided you through high concepts and internal structures and subtle perceptions. But now, it is time to bring all of this down to the ground of real life. We need to see where the rubber meets the road. Because true emotional mastery is not proven in silence or during isolated reflection on a mountaintop. It is easy to be zen when you are alone. Mastery reveals itself in the daily grind. It shows up in simple situations. It appears in the repetitive and apparently banal moments of your routine. Observe a common scene. Imagine a difficult conversation at work. Perhaps a passive-aggressive comment from a colleague or an unexpected delay on a project. Or maybe just a small frustration that arrives at the end of an exhausting day. Two people experience the exact same situation. The external facts are identical, but the internal reality is worlds apart. The first person reacts immediately. The body contracts physically. The voice changes pitch. The mind accelerates to find a defense. The emotion assumes command of the ship. Hours later, or perhaps even days later, this person is still ruminating on what happened. They are replaying the argument in the shower. They are justifying their reaction mentally. They are reinforcing the emotional identity they already know. They are trapped in the loop. The second person perceives the exact same stimulus, but something is fundamentally different. There is a space. There is a small gap between what happens and the response. They feel the discomfort. They feel the heat. But they do not confuse themselves with it. They breathe. They observe. They sustain neutrality. The situation passes. The field remains integral. What changes is not the event. The traffic is still bad. The boss is still rude. What changes is the internal sustenance. As Alan Watts explains in his lectures on consciousness and impermanence, especially in the ideas presented in The Wisdom of Insecurity, he teaches us that suffering arises when we resist the natural flow of experience. When we try to fix or justify or prolong emotional states, we create unnecessary tension. We are trying to hold water in a clenched fist. Maturity lies in allowing the experience to happen without becoming a prisoner of it. This applies directly to daily life. A person who does not sustain neutrality transforms small setbacks into full-blown crises. An unreturned text message turns into a story of rejection. A simple mistake turns into proof of incapacity. A boundary set by someone else turns into a personal attack. This is living in defense mode. On the other hand, a person who sustains the field understands the mechanics. Emotions arise and fulfill their function, and then they move on. You do not need to win the situation. You do not need to defeat the other person. You simply need to traverse it. Jung, in his extensive work, made it clear that what is not recognized consciously repeats itself as a pattern. In everyday life, this translates into relationships that follow the exact same script. The actors change, the scenery changes, but the internal dynamic remains exactly the same. When you sustain neutrality, these old scripts begin to lose their power, not because life becomes perfect overnight, but because your field no longer feeds the repetition. Let us look at another daily example: a romantic relationship. An emotionally unstable person lives in a state of constant alert. Every silence is interpreted as withdrawal. Every disagreement turns into a threat to the bond. The relationship becomes heavy because the field is always defending itself against invisible enemies. Another person with greater emotional sustenance feels insecurity when it arises, but they do not weaponize it. They do not transform it into accusation or control or cold withdrawal. They observe it. They communicate with clarity. They maintain presence. The relationship breathes. It has oxygen. This is not luck. It is an organized field. Jordan Peterson would approach this by saying that emotional maturity is the capacity to sustain responsibility even under pressure. It means not outsourcing your reactions. It means not hiding behind impulses. It means not justifying destructive behaviors with momentary emotions. And Helio Couto would reinforce that the field responds to the sustained pattern and not to the isolated event. Life begins to organize itself differently when you stop reacting compulsively to what you feel. It is important to understand something here. Sustaining neutrality does not mean becoming passive or becoming a doormat. Quite the contrary. It means acting from clarity instead of acting from defense. It means saying no when necessary. It means establishing firm boundaries. It means making difficult choices but doing so without emotional contamination. Neutrality does not remove force. Neutrality directs force. When you sustain, the field decisions stop being made to relieve temporary emotions. They start being made to build coherence. This changes entire trajectories over time. This chapter exists so that you can observe yourself in practice, Do not look for mastery in the ideal moments. Look for it in the common moments. It is there that emotional mastery reveals itself. In the next and final chapter, I will lead you to the final exercise of this journey. It is a silent and deep and intentional exercise. It should not be explained or discussed. It must only be lived. The journey continues. We have arrived at the most sensitive and perhaps the most powerful point of this entire journey. Everything we have discussed up to this moment had a single distinct purpose. It was all designed to prepare you for this specific task, to sustain an internal state without effort, without internal conflict, and without emotional dependency on the outside world. This is not an exercise designed to generate an immediate sensation or a quick thrill. It is not a technique to provoke a specific emotion or to make you feel high. It is an exercise to reorganize the field itself. As Alan Watts explains in his lectures on consciousness and detachment, especially in the reflections gathered in the wisdom of insecurity. Human suffering arises when we try to control the flow of experience. We try to freeze the wave. True freedom appears when we stop interfering. It happens when we learn to remain present while life moves around us. This exercise is born exactly from this principle. Jung, in his extensive work, made it clear that what is integrated in silence stops returning as a compulsion. It stops haunting the system. It is not mental repetition that transforms you. It is conscious presence that dissolves the knot. Therefore, what I am about to lead you into should not be analyzed. It should not be commented on or rationalized. It must simply be lived. Choose a moment in your day when you can be absolutely without interruption for a few minutes. Try to choose the same time every day if possible to create a rhythm. Sit, with your spine comfortable but upright. Do not be rigid. Close your eyes gently. Breathe naturally. Nothing needs to be adjusted here. Nothing needs to be improved. Allow the body to decelerate on its own time. Now bring your attention to the center of your chest. Do not force any sensations. Do not look for lights or tingling. Just direct your consciousness there. From this point on, I will pronounce a few phrases. These are not affirmations to convince your analytical mind. They are instructions for the field. Do not repeat them out loud. Repeat them internally in the rhythm of your breathing. I am present. I am safe now. Allow a few seconds of silence. Let it settle. I observe what arises without confusing myself with it. Nothing needs to be fought. Silence again. I sustain neutrality. I allow the field to organize itself. Breathe. I do not interfere with the flow. I remain. These phrases should not be altered. Do not adapt them. Do not explain them to yourself. The power of this exercise lies in the consistency and not in the intensity. Do this for a few minutes. Do not time it. Let the body indicate the moment to end. When you open your eyes, do not look for magical signs. Just follow your day. As Halio-Kuto reinforces the field, responds to what is sustained with coherence over time. Do not expect abrupt changes. Observe subtle reorganizations. Notice small different choices. Notice calmer reactions. Notice quieter thoughts. This is the field adjusting itself. Jordan Peterson would say that this is the point where the individual assumes real responsibility for their own internal state. You stop delegating to emotion. You stop blaming the environment. You stop waiting for ideal conditions. Sustained neutrality is maturity. This exercise does not need to be done forever. Do it for a few days. Observe. If you feel something reorganizing, continue. If you feel resistance, just observe the resistance. That is also information. Do not transform this into a rigid ritual. Do not transform this into an obligation. Transform it into presence. The journey that started out here now continues inside you. Without an audience, without effort, without noise. And when the field organizes, life responds. The journey continues.